Now I wanted to talk about a pattern of success that I found, classic rut hunts. And once again, there are two more hunts like this that I was able to capitalize on in 2018. And these are a reflection of how I love to hunt the rut and what's been successful for me many, many years, going back into the early 90s, for opportunities on target bucks during the rut in this classic setup that everyone should have on their land. And this is my money hunting tactic every year, where you can hunt during the rut and expect to capitalize on bucks. And this is something that I plan for, we plan stands for, we look for ahead of time. And it happened twice out of the same stand last year. And I want to tell you about it and why these conditions happen. First, I want to point out some bucks. I have some bucks sitting around me right here. And I have a few right here that really came down to this exact same setup that I was able to capitalize on last season. And again, going back for many years, this has worked for me. Starting over here, I have this one right here. That one was from 2005. Classic morning rut hunt under these same conditions. I want to say that was more like November 8th, 10th. This one right here was in 2004. And I believe, I might get some of these mixed up, but again, first set stand location. Point that out real quick. This buck right here was an October 22nd buck. Classic rut hunt, first time sitting in the stand. Perfect opportunity. Same with this drop tine buck right here. Same thing. And I know I'm forgetting some around here, some of my favorite hunts, but this is a system that works. And it all boils down to making sure you have those morning stands that you can take advantage of, that are between bedding areas, backside of bedding areas, near where you think mature bucks are bedding, and especially does, and you're waiting on those stands. And so what I'm doing, and what happened with both of these hunts, is going into that peak rut. I want to say the first one was November 8th or November 4th of 2018. It could have been the 5th or 3rd. I know it was right around there. Going into a stand that Dylan and I had scouted in February. It was between bedding areas, bedding area on the other side of the ridge, and classic rut movement where it's in a thick area. We're 350 yards away from food. We're getting there in the morning. And I'll tell you, for the first hour and a half, a lot of times in these locations and where I've shot a lot of these bucks, is you're waiting to see deer. It's a perfect time and you're just not seeing them. And it's because we're 350 yards away from the food. Now, it wouldn't matter if we were down in a valley or we were back in some cover a long ways. In these cases, we're up high a lot of times, but we're waiting for those deer to come back, and they're just not getting there because there's so much activity during that time of year taking place down by the food sources, around the mock scrapes, water holes near food sources, other bucks, does, rubs, scrapes. There's so much to do for those bucks during the rut in the morning before they get to you. So our sweet spot of timing in there is anywhere from 2 hours after daylight to 4 hours. And both of these were shot last year right around that 2 hour, 2.5 hour mark, to the point where you're starting to think, and they were the first deer we saw, but you're starting to think, oh, are we going to see anything during these sets? Saving that stand for those morning rut hunts is so critical. If I would have gone into either of those stands during poor weather days, warm days, windy days, stormy days, sure, there might have been a chance that I could shoot a buck there. There's always a chance if you're in the woods, but the percentage of chance is very, very low. So we go into those stands early, we leave our scent, we bup some deer getting in or out, and all of a sudden that great sit that takes place 7 days later with the weather forecast. And yes, you can see those great weather factors coming about 7 to 10 days out. If you see a major drop in the weather, start to focusing on that. Major drop in the temperature, start to focus on that. You can focus on that at least a week out, something that's very important. But if you use those stands and you burn those stands out ahead of time, that quality hunt is not going to take place. Last year, 2 sits out of that stand, 2 bucks. I've had that pattern over and over again. Most of these bucks here were first sit stand locations. I'd say the vast majority, and there's a couple that were second or third sit, but most of them were on the first time using that stand. And it's not that I have 50 stands out there. It's just that you have to be patient for when you go into it. So it's that morning rut hunt. Bucks are typically moving 3 times more during the morning hours during the rut than they are the afternoon hours. We see a sharp drop off of buck activity during the middle of the day because we're in ag area. We're in areas where there's a lot of hunters. When I find there's a lot of hunters getting in at lunchtime, they might push deer. But when you have deer that are slotted in, they're not very pressured, they're not moving that much. When you get in the big wilderness, big hardwood areas, you see a lot of movement during the middle of the day. But when you have standard feeding routes in the afternoon, high quality food sources, a lot of activity at night, big social areas, it seems like they take a break during the heat of the day. And that's the case around here. And so saving that stand, watching for the weather, taking advantage of major movements during the morning hours, and then also taking advantage of rising thermals. Rising thermals are very predictable. If you get above the deer, then you have a great opportunity. And in both of these hunts last year, going in there to the peak of the rut, and then folks, don't forget about the secondary rut. That is probably the most missed window in the whitetail woods anywhere all season long. The secondary rut does take place. It takes place 28 days after the peak of the primary rut, and for around here that'd be early December. So shoot the buck on the 4th or 5th of November, good rutting activity, coming up out of a bedding area, following a doe. Fast forward 28 days out of the same stand, the same scenario is taking place. Doe's coming up over the ridge, right into our in early December, right into our laps. And then we're taking advantage of that with a muzzleloader hunt, secondary rut, same stand, same conditions, morning time, same thing. It's getting windy in our face. We know there's a blizzard coming on that Saturday or Friday, whenever it was. And we're starting to get antsy, wondering if we're going to see deer. And sure enough, doe comes right over the ridge, right down into our lap, early December, 28 days, 30 days, whatever it was after the first buck I shot. And that's that classic secondary rut. These are the ingredients that I use for the majority of my buck harvest. Most of the largest bucks I've shot have been with my bow, and they've been during that rut period all the way to the earliest opportunities have been October 20th, and then all the way up to about November 10th, November 12th, and then fast forwarding to the second rut. Great time, great strategy. Most of those stands I'm taking care of in May, June. I'm not going back until the rut. And it's worth the wait. And you can never look at it like, man, I'm spending X amount of dollars for the stand setup. We're putting this all together and we're only going to use it one time. Well, if you only use it one time and you're shooting a buck out of it 50% of the sits, it's worth it. It really is. Always look for that classic morning rut hunt sit, that rut morning setup. We've already established, we found another tree a little while ago we talked about in an earlier video on a red cedar that we're going to stick a stand in this year, and I expect that one to pay off too. That's how you hunt the rut. That's that classic success story. That's the setup we used last year. I use it every year. I have dreams. That's where the dreams are made of, out of those stands. It worked again. I hope it makes sense, and I hope that you can take advantage of it this fall during this rut.